Islam, however, proceeded on a very different kind of founding narrative. The Qur'an records conflicts, sometimes quite sharp ones, between the early Muslims and individual Jews and Jewish tribes. And there is a Qur'anic polemic against Judaism. However, the distinction is that the Jews are not singled out as some kind of uniquely malevolent force in history. Similarly, the Qur'an does not accuse them of the crucifixion of Jesus or of deicide. For Muslim theology, the Jews have not killed God, since God is not and never has been incarnate. So for most of Muslim history, we find that the Muslim world was in fact relatively benign and tolerant towards Jews. The Christian Byzantine Empire had actually prohibited Jews from living in Jerusalem. As soon as the Muslim armies captured Jerusalem, a proclamation was issued and Jews could return and live there in peace. So it's been estimated that as many as 9/10 of medieval Jewry actually lived in the world of Islam. Blood libels and pogroms of a type normal in Europe were actually effectively unknown in the Muslim world. Jews could rise to senior administrative positions. Maimonides himself, for instance, became the personal physician of the great Saladin. And as Samuel Goitein has said, compared to Christian Europe, the lands of Islam were a paradise for the Jewish people. Recently I came across an interesting illustration of this in my visit to Bosnia. There is a Bosnian Jewish community, sadly decimated during the Holocaust, but there's still a few thousand of them there. And their family language is actually Ladino, which is a kind of Spanish. They're Sephardic Jews who, after the Reconquista of Muslim Spain in 1492, chose to emigrate to other Muslim countries rather than live under the rule of the Catholic monarchs. And for 500 years they've retained this very Spanish aspect of their culture. And in fact, when the Ottomans conquered Constantinople, they sent rabbis out to Germany and other parts in Europe, inviting Jews to come and settle in Constantinople, to live there and to support the economic and demographic growth that the Ottomans wished to see there. Now, this is a very encouraging example of medieval tolerance and even symbiosis, and I think when we contemplate the frankly quite dismal misunderstandings that exist between Jews and Muslims today, it's very important that we be aware of it and bear it in mind. Since 1948, this symbiosis and this even empathy has suffered immeasurably because of the creation of the State of Israel. From 1948, there has been a forced expulsion of the mainly Muslim Palestinian population from their homes and a continued Israeli policy of constructing Jewish settlements on occupied Arab land. And this, understandably, makes it very difficult for modern Muslims to look with the old equanimity on the Jewish people. Zionism has, in practice, tended to be resolutely hostile to the non-Jewish populations it conquers. For instance, a booklet published by the Central Region Command of the Israeli Army explains, quote, "Under no circumstances should an Arab be trusted, even if he makes an impression of being civilized. In war, when our forces storm the enemy, they are allowed and even enjoined by the halakha, Jewish law, to kill even good civilians." That's not the view of some extremist, that's there in a document published by a unit of the Israeli Army. And the current Oslo Agreement, which has actually accelerated Israeli settlement building and precipitated a rapid upturn in the death rate on both sides, has already made matters even worse. So the situation in dialogue between Muslims and Jews is a very fraught one. In fact, there are very few contexts, at least in Britain, where there is serious dialogue taking place. Anyway, so much for the historical background. The message is quite simple. Despite superficial complexities, recent hostility among Muslims is the result of political circumstances, not the result of any fundamental clash in doctrine. Jews and Muslims, in their understanding of God and in their methods for achieving salvation, actually more or less speak the same language. And historically, the coexistence of Muslims and Jews is one of the most encouraging examples of religious toleration.